The desperate call. The crystalline spires of Talia Prime, once gleaming beacons of hope against the azure sky, now stood fractured and smoldering. Smoke billowed from countless impact craters across the capital city's surface, a grim testament to the 6 weeks of relentless bombardment. In low orbit, the massive warships of the Kronter Dominion hung like obsidian predators, their silhouettes visible even through the ash-choked atmosphere. In the deepest level of the government sanctuary, Prime Minister Ilara Vos watched the tactical displays with hollow eyes. The Talian Defense Forces, never particularly strong to begin with, had been utterly decimated. Their allies, those who had signed countless treaties and trade agreements over centuries, had abandoned them one by one when the Kronter ultimatum reached their worlds. "We regret that we cannot intervene in this conflict," they all said with barely concealed relief that the Kronter hunger for conquest had focused elsewhere. The message was clear: better the Talians than us. Prime Minister, Science Director Callan's voice broke through Ilara's dark thoughts. The evacuation transports report only 25% capacity. Our people are refusing to leave their ancestral homes. Ilara nodded slowly, unsurprised. The Talians had evolved as a communal species, their neural pathways literally strengthened by proximity to their kin and ancestral grounds. The thought of abandoning their homeworld was anathema to most, a fate potentially worse than death. "The sanctuary worlds have gone silent," Ilara said softly. "Even if we could evacuate everyone, I'm no longer certain anywhere would accept us." The sanctuary shook as another orbital bombardment struck nearby. Dust drifted from the reinforced ceiling, the lights flickering momentarily before stabilizing. "We've tried everything," Defense Coordinator Jad said, his voice cracking. "Every diplomatic channel, every former ally, every neutral power. None will stand against the Kronter." Silence fell over the command center, broken only by the soft peeps of monitoring equipment and the distant rumble of explosions. The Talians were a peaceful species, their culture built around art, science, and cosmic harmony. For thousands of years, they had believed that diplomacy and mutual prosperity were the paths to security. They had been wrong. "There is one option we haven't considered," said a quiet voice from the communication station. All eyes turned to Terrace, the youngest member of the High Council. Fresh from the academy, she had been appointed just days before the invasion began. "The humans," she said, meeting the Prime Minister's gaze steadily. The word hung in the air. Humanity. The newest species on the galactic stage, having achieved faster-than-light travel barely 40 years ago. An enigma that had joined the galactic concord but remained largely isolated, establishing only minimal diplomatic and trade relations. "The humans have no stake in this conflict," Jad objected. "They have no treaties with us, no obligations. But they have no treaties with the Kronter either," Terrace countered. "And they're the only major power that hasn't explicitly refused to help." Ilara frowned. "What do we even know about them? Their military capability? Their technology level? Would they even have the power to stand against the Kronter if they wanted to?" Nobody answered. Humanity was a mystery. Unlike other species that proudly displayed their military might or technological achievements upon joining the galactic community, humans had been remarkably reticent about their capabilities. They maintained minimal embassies, engaged in modest trade, and spoke little of their homeworld or military strength. Some speculated this was because they were weak and primitive despite achieving FTL travel. Others whispered darker theories, that humans were hiding something. "We have nothing to lose," Terrace said finally. "Our people are dying. Our world burns. If there's even the slightest chance..." Ilara stared at the tactical display, watching another section of the capital city turn red as Kronter ground forces advanced. Terrace was right. They had nothing left to lose. "Send the message," Ilara ordered. A direct appeal to their highest authority. No diplomatic niceties, no formal language. Tell them exactly what's happening here. Tell them we're being exterminated. The communications officers worked quickly, composing a simple distress call. Unlike the formal diplomatic requests they had sent to their supposed allies, this message was raw, desperate, a dying civilization's final plea. To the government and people of Earth, we are the Talians. The Kronter Dominion is systematically destroying our world and people. All others have abandoned us. If you can help in any way, please respond. This is our final transmission. The message was sent through every channel they had, broadcast widely enough that the Kronter would certainly intercept it too. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered now except the increasingly slim hope of survival. Hours passed. The sanctuary shook repeatedly as Kronter bombardments intensified, cracking even the reinforced structures designed to withstand natural disasters. System after system reported failures. The end was approaching. Prime Minister. The communications officer called suddenly, voice tight with surprise. We're receiving a response. It's from Earth. The command center fell silent. Ilara straightened, ignoring the pain from 3 days without proper rest. Put it through. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a human face. Female, Ilara thought, though her knowledge of human sexual dimorphism was limited. The human wore a simple dark uniform with minimal insignia. I am Admiral Helena Chen of the United Earth Defense Force, the human said without preamble, her voice calm, methodical. We have received your distress call and verified the situation. Help is coming. Please transmit the coordinates of all Kronter fleet positions and your remaining defensive capabilities. Ilara stared in disbelief. No expressions of sympathy, no diplomatic hedging, no questions about what Earth would gain from intervention. Just a simple statement that help was coming, as if it were the most natural response in the world. Admiral, Ilara managed finally. We are grateful, but you should understand. The Kronter have over 300 warships in our system. They are the most powerful military force in this sector of the galaxy. The human's expression didn't change. I am aware of the Kronter Dominion's general capabilities. Please transmit the requested tactical data. Our advanced forces will arrive within 8 hours. Chen out. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the Talian leadership staring at each other in stunned silence. 8 hours. Jad finally sputtered. That's impossible. Even with the most advanced FTL drives, the nearest human outpost is at least 3 days away at maximum speed. Perhaps they already had ships nearby, Terrans suggested. Monitoring would have detected them. The defense coordinator objected. There are no human vessels within our detection range. It doesn't matter, Ilara said firmly. Send them everything we have, all Kronter positions, all tactical data. If there's even a chance they're coming, they'll need it. The next 7 hours were a blur of continued bombardment, failing systems, and desperate coordination of the remaining Talian forces. Few in the sanctuary truly believed help would arrive, but the humans' promise had given them something to focus on beyond imminent death. When the proximity alarm sounded, everyone assumed it was yet another wave of Kronter attackers. New contacts, the sensor operator called out, voice rising in pitch. Massive energy signatures, numerous vessels dropping out of FTL directly in system. Kronter reinforcements, Ilara asked grimly. No, the operator replied, staring at her displays in disbelief. Unknown configuration. They're coming in behind a Kronter fleet, hundreds of them. The tactical display updated, showing a swarm of new signatures appearing as if from nowhere. Not dozens of ships as they had desperately hoped, but hundreds. The vessels were smaller than the massive Kronter dreadnoughts, but there were so many of them, emerging in perfect formation. They're hailing us, the communications officer reported. And the Kronter fleet. Put it through, Ilara ordered, heart pounding. Admiral Chen's face appeared again, still impassive, though Ilara thought she detected a hint of cold determination in those alien eyes. Prime Minister Vol, this is Admiral Chen commanding the Earth Expeditionary Fleet. We have arrived as promised and are engaging the Kronter forces. Please direct all civilian population to shelter in place. This will be over soon." Before Ilara could respond, the transmission shifted to an open channel, now broadcasting to both Talion and Krontar forces. Shen's voice took on a harder edge. "Attention, Krontar fleet. This is Admiral Helena Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. You are engaged in the unprovoked assault of a peaceful civilization. You will power down your weapons, withdraw your ground forces, and leave this system immediately. You have 5 minutes to comply. There will be no further warnings." In the deathly silence that followed, Callan leaned toward Ilara. "They can't possibly think the Krontar will retreat," he whispered. "The Krontar Dominion has never backed down from anyone." Ilara could only watch the tactical display, where the human fleet was spreading out in formations unlike anything she had seen before, not the rigid hierarchical arrangements favored by most galactic powers, but something fluid, adaptive, and utterly alien. The Krontar response came swiftly, exactly as expected. "Unknown fleet, this is High Commander Drazik of the glorious Krontar Dominion. Your interference in Imperial matters is an act of war. You will withdraw immediately or be destroyed alongside the Talion vermin." Admiral Chen didn't respond to the threat. Instead, the human fleet suddenly accelerated, their formation shifting again like a living organism. And then the impossible happened. The first Krontar dreadnought exploded in a brilliant flash of light, followed by another and another. On the tactical display, human ships moved with impossible speed and precision, targeting the Krontar vessels with devastating accuracy. "By the ancestors," breathed the defense coordinator. "What are we seeing?" No one answered. No one had words to describe the impossible unfolding before them. The humans had arrived, and they had come ready for war. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Admiral Helena Chen watched the tactical display with practiced calm. The initial strike had gone precisely as planned. The Krontar dreadnoughts, despite their imposing size and firepower, were proving remarkably vulnerable to the human fleet's distributed attack patterns. "Sir, Krontar vessels are realigning to defensive formations," reported Commander Jackson, her tactical officer. "Their response time is slower than intelligence predicted." Chen nodded slightly. "They're not used to being on the defensive. Maintain Phase 1 protocols. All strike groups continue target prioritization as planned." The human fleet moved like a coordinated swarm, hundreds of smaller vessels striking with precision, then dispersing before Krontar weapons could lock on. Earth's warships were not the massive, heavily armored behemoths favored by most galactic powers. Instead, they were sleek, agile, and networked in ways the Krontar could not comprehend. "The Talions are transmitting their gratitude, Admiral," Communications Officer Lin said. "They're quite emotional." "Acknowledged," Chen replied, her attention never leaving the tactical display. "Remind them to keep their remaining ships in the designated safe zones." As the battle unfolded in space, Lieutenant Commander Riza Karim led the first wave of Earth's ground forces toward Talia Prime's surface. Inside the assault carrier, 200 Marines checked their equipment one final time. "Listen up," Karim called out, his voice carrying through the compartment. "Intel says the Krontar have never faced coordinated ground resistance. They're used to occupation, not combat. We're going to show them the difference." Staff Sergeant Maya Williams tightened the seals on her combat exoskeleton. "Just like Titan training grounds, boss." "Easier," Karim replied with a grim smile. "On Titan, the environment tries to kill you too." The Marines' laughter was cut short as the ship's AI announced their approach to the drop zone. Within minutes, 50 human dropships were screaming through Talia Prime's atmosphere, heading for the most heavily contested sectors of the capital city. Back in the Talion Command Sanctuary, Ilara and her council watched in awe as real-time feeds showed human forces engaging the Krontar ground troops. The invaders, so devastating against the civilian convert-to-militia Talion defenders, were suddenly facing something entirely different. Their armor, Jad said, watching the human soldier absorb fire that would have vaporized a Talion warrior. It's not just protective, it's enhancing them. Look at how they move, Terrace added. They're coordinating across all units simultaneously. The Krontar, accustomed to overwhelming force and intimidation, found themselves facing an enemy that refused to be intimidated. Human soldiers moved with a fluid precision that seemed almost preternatural, attacking weak points the Krontar didn't even realize they had. In orbit, the battle was transforming. After the initial shock, the Krontar fleet was attempting to regroup, bringing the full might of their remaining capital ships to bear. They're massing for a concentrated attack, Jackson reported to Admiral Chen, targeting our central command vessels. They still think we're organized like they are, Chen observed. Execute dispersal pattern Hydra. All command functions distribute according to protocol. The human fleet's formation suddenly shifted, power signatures changing, command signals routing through different vessels. To the Krontar sensors, it would appear as if the human fleet had lost cohesion, breaking apart under pressure. It was exactly what the Dominion's High Commander Drazak expected. The humans falter. He bellowed on the Krontar command frequency. Their formation breaks. Press the attack. Show them the might of the Dominion. The Krontar fleet surged forward, concentrating fire on what they believed were the human command ships. But there were no command ships, or rather, every ship was capable of command functions. The human fleet's apparent disarray was actually a predetermined response, allowing them to encircle the now exposed Krontar attack group. They took the bait, Jackson said. All ships have targeting solutions. Chen's expression remained unchanged. Execute. Across the battlefield, Earth vessels fired simultaneously. Weapons that the Krontar sensors couldn't properly classify tore through supposedly impenetrable shields. Dominion ships, some centuries old and veterans of dozens of conquests, began to shatter under the onslaught. On Talia Prime's surface, the tide was turning just as dramatically. Human Marines had secured key positions throughout the capital, creating safe corridors for Talian civilians to reach shelter. Lieutenant Commander Karim's team had pushed to the central plaza, once the cultural heart of the city, now a Krontar command post. Sergeant Williams, status on the hostages, Karim asked through the combat net. Confirmed 23 Talian officials being held in the Eastern Chamber, Williams replied. Guards are on high alert, but they don't know we're here yet. All teams, execute on my mark, Karim ordered. Remember, the Krontar don't surrender. If they resist, they're combatants. The precision of the rescue operation would later become legendary in Talian records. Human soldiers moved through the Krontar positions like ghosts, neutralizing threats with surgical precision. The Krontar, used to enemies who either fled in terror or fought with desperate last stands, were unprepared for the methodical efficiency of human special operations. In the Talian command sanctuary, real-time footage of the rescue brought tears to Ilara's eyes. They're saving our people, she whispered. Not just fighting the Krontar, they're actually saving individuals. The humans fight differently, Terrace observed. Look at their tactics. They're not just trying to win. They're trying to minimize all casualties, even their own. Jad, the skeptical defense coordinator, could only shake his head in wonder. Who are these people? Where did they come from? In orbit, the battle reached its critical phase. The Krontar fleet, for the first time in centuries, was on the verge of defeat. Over half their vessels had been destroyed or disabled, while the human fleet, despite taking damage, maintained operational cohesion. High Commander Drazak, facing the unthinkable prospect of defeat, made the decision that exposed the true nature of the Krontar Dominion. Target the Talian population centers, he commanded. If we cannot have this world, no one will. Maximum yield planetary bombardment. Begin immediately. The remaining Krontar dreadnoughts turned their planet-killer weapons toward Talia Prime's surface. Such weapons had only been used twice in recorded galactic history, both times by the Krontar, as demonstrations of their absolute power. The resulting devastation had rendered those worlds uninhabitable for centuries. Admiral, Jackson called out. Kronter vessels are repositioning. Energy signatures consistent with their K-class planetary weapons. Chen's eyes narrowed slightly, the only outward sign of emotion she had displayed since the battle began. Initiate Aegis Protocol, she ordered. All defensive systems to maximum. Prioritize intercept trajectories. What happened next would reshape galactic understanding of warfare. As the Kronter weapons fired, a new formation of human vessels moved into position between the beams and the planet's surface. Energy shields unlike anything seen before flared to life, absorbing and dispersing the immense destructive power meant to scour the world below. In the Talion sanctuary, alarms screamed as sensors detected the Kronter weapons discharge. "They're trying to destroy the planet," Callan cried out. "The Kronter are firing their planet killers." Ilara closed her eyes, certain that the end had finally come. When several seconds passed without impact, she looked back at the tactical display in confusion. "The human ships," Jad said in disbelief. They're blocking the beams. They're shielding our world with their vessels." On the command channel, Admiral Chen's voice came through, as calm as ever despite the unprecedented strain on her fleet. "Talion Command, be advised that Kronter planetary weapons have been contained. Expect atmospheric disturbance, but no surface impact. Stand by." Ilara stared at the display, watching human ships deliberately positioning themselves in the path of weapons designed to crack a planet's crust. It defied comprehension. "They're sacrificing themselves for us," she whispered. But the human ships weren't being destroyed as expected. Their shields, while clearly under immense strain, were holding, redirecting the destructive energy away from both themselves and the planet. In space, Admiral Chen issued her next command. "All strike teams, execute Guillotine Protocol. Target Kronter command vessels only." Special human attack craft, held in reserve until this moment, streaked toward the heart of the remaining Kronter fleet. Their mission was singular: decapitate the Dominion's command structure. On the bridge of his flagship, High Commander Drazek received the warning too late. "Unknown vessels approaching at high velocity. They've bypassed our outer defen." The transmission cut off as precision strikes disabled the Dominion command ships, not destroying them, but systematically neutralizing their ability to fight or coordinate. Across the battlefield, the Kronter forces found themselves suddenly leaderless, their rigid hierarchy collapsing without central command. Within minutes, the once mighty invasion force was reduced to isolated pockets of resistance, unable to coordinate or continue their planetary assault. The Battle of Talia Prime, as it would later be known, had just witnessed its turning point. The turning point. As dawn broke over Talia Prime's ravaged capital, the full extent of humanity's intervention became clear. Kronter forces were in full retreat, their once mighty fleet reduced to scattered vessels fleeing the system. On the surface, human Marines worked alongside Talion emergency services, extracting civilians from collapsed structures and establishing medical centers. In what remained of the government sanctuary, Prime Minister Ilara Vos prepared to meet the human commander face-to-face. Admiral Helena Chen had requested a direct conference once the immediate military threat was contained. "What do we even say to them?" Colin asked, his voice hushed. "How do we thank someone for saving our entire species?" Ilara straightened her ceremonial robes, scorched and tattered, but the only formal attire that remained. "We start by asking who they really are," she replied, "and why they came when no one else would." The meeting chamber, hastily cleared of debris, fell silent as Admiral Chen entered, accompanied by two officers. In person, the human commander was not physically imposing, shorter than most Talions, with a lean build that suggested efficiency rather than strength. Yet her presence filled the room immediately. "Prime Minister Vos," Chen said with a formal vow, "on behalf of the United Earth government, I extend our sincere regret that we could not arrive sooner." Ilara blinked at the unexpected apology. "Admiral Chen, you and your forces saved our civilization from extinction. You came when all our so-called allies abandoned us. We owe you everything." Chen shook her head slightly. You owe us nothing. We responded as any sentient species should when witnessing the attempted extermination of another. But why? Jad asked, unable to contain himself. What does Earth gain from this intervention? The resources spent, the risks taken. A flicker of something, perhaps surprise, crossed Chen's face. Gain, she repeated. Defense coordinator, we don't measure humanitarian intervention in terms of gain. Your people were facing extinction. That was the only calculation that mattered. The Talion officials exchanged glances. In a galaxy dominated by carefully calculated self-interest, where even long-standing allies had abandoned them when the cost of intervention seemed too high, the human perspective was almost incomprehensible. Admiral, Ilara said carefully, your forces displayed capabilities far beyond what most believed humans possessed. Your fleet appeared with impossible speed. Your weapons and shields, they shouldn't exist at our galaxy's current technology level. Chen nodded, apparently having expected this line of questioning. Humanity has always been cautious about revealing our full capabilities, she explained. In our pre-space history, we learned hard lessons about the dangers of technological disparities between civilizations. You've been hiding your true strength, Terrans said, understanding dawning. All these years in the Galactic Concord, not hiding, Chen corrected, waiting, observing, learning how this galaxy functions before fully committing ourselves to its power structures. She gestured toward a display showing the ongoing humanitarian operations. What we witnessed with the Krontar attack on your world forced our hand. A species that employs planet-killing weapons against civilian populations cannot be allowed to continue unchecked. The Krontar Dominion has subjugated dozens of worlds, Jad pointed out. They've been expanding for centuries. Why intervene here? Why now? Chen's expression hardened slightly. Because you asked. The simple answer hung in the air between them. We asked, Ilara repeated. That's it. Because we sent a distress call. Prime Minister, humanity has a complex history, Chen said. For most of our development, we were alone in our star system, believing ourselves possibly alone in the universe. We fought our own wars, nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times. When we finally achieved unity and looked to the stars, we carried with us a solemn promise, never to allow the strong to prey upon the weak when we had the power to intervene. She paused, choosing her words carefully. When we joined the Galactic Concord and observed how established powers behaved, the casual abandonment of obligations when convenience dictated, the selective enforcement of supposed principles, we chose to move carefully, to maintain a low profile until we understood this new environment fully. And now, Colin asked, the Krontar will return. They've never accepted defeat. They will not return, Chen stated with absolute certainty. Even as we speak, Earth diplomatic and military representatives are meeting with the Krontar hierarchy. They are being presented with evidence of their violations of galactic law and the consequences of continuing such behavior. The Krontar don't respond to diplomatic pressure, Jad scoffed. They respect only force. Then they will respect the force we've demonstrated, Chen replied evenly. But it is our hope that they will choose diplomacy instead. Humanity prefers resolution without destruction whenever possible. As if on cue, a human officer entered and whispered something to Chen. The admiral nodded and turned back to the Talion leadership. The Krontar hierarchy has agreed to immediate cessation of hostilities against the Talion people and reparations for the damage caused. They've also agreed to independent monitoring of their military activities for the foreseeable future. The Talions stared in disbelief. How? Ilara finally managed. The Krontar have never. We were very persuasive, Chen said simply, and we made it clear that the alternative to diplomatic resolution would be significantly more unpleasant for their civilization. In the days that followed, the true scope of humanity's intervention became apparent. Earth ships maintained a protective presence around Talia Prime, while human aid workers helped rebuild critical infrastructure. Medical teams treated the injured with technologies that seemed miraculous, healing wounds and trauma that Talion medicine could not address. More surprising was the arrival of civilian human vessels, scientists, cultural experts, and ordinary citizens volunteering to help a species most humans had never heard of before the crisis. 1 week after the battle, Ilara found herself walking through a makeshift hospital with Dr. Sanjay Mehta, the human medical coordinator. "Your people's cellular structure is fascinating," Mehta was saying, enthusiasm evident in his voice. "The way your neural pathways respond to communal proximity. We have nothing like that in human physiology." "Doctor," Ilara interrupted, "I've been meaning to ask. Your medical teams, they're treating everyone, even captured Krontor soldiers." Mehta looked surprised at the observation. "Of course, they're injured sentients under our care. But they were trying to exterminate us just days ago," Ilara pressed. "They would not have shown the same consideration to your wounded." The doctor stopped walking and turned to face her directly. "Prime Minister, how we treat others, especially our enemies, defines who we are more than any victory in battle. Humanity learned this lesson through centuries of our own conflicts. We don't extend medical care because the Krontor deserve it, but because we'd cease to be who we are if we withheld it." That evening, in a meeting with her reconstructed council, Ilara found herself struggling to articulate the fundamental shift in her understanding of the galaxy. "They're not like any species we've encountered," she told her advisors. "The humans, they possess devastating military capability, yet they value individual life above all else. They can destroy fleets, yet they focus on saving single lives. It contradicts everything we thought we knew about how power operates." Terrans, who had been spending considerable time with human cultural liaisons, nodded thoughtfully. "Their history is unlike ours. While most galactic species evolved through relatively stable development, humanity nearly destroyed itself multiple times. Their philosophies, their moral frameworks, they were forged in the ashes of their own catastrophes." "And now," Jad asked, "what happens when they leave?" "The power dynamics of the entire sector have been upended." "They're not leaving," Ilara revealed. "Not completely. Admiral Chen has proposed a formal alliance, not the paper treaties we had with others, but a genuine mutual defense agreement. Earth will maintain a presence here, help us rebuild our own defensive capabilities." "In exchange for what?" Colin asked warily. "There must be conditions." "That's the remarkable thing," Ilara replied. "They ask only that we consider doing the same for others in the future. That once we're strong enough, we help extend the same protection to other vulnerable worlds." 2 months after the Battle of Talia Prime, representatives from 27 worlds gathered in the partially restored Grand Assembly. Species that had previously avoided association with the Talions now sought diplomatic ties, not with the Talions directly, but with the humans who had come to their aid. Admiral Chen, preparing to transfer command to a permanent diplomatic mission, stood beside Ilara on the assembly balcony overlooking the rebuilding city. "Your intervention has changed everything," Ilara observed. "The balance of power, diplomatic relationships, nothing works the way it did before." Chen's usual composure softened slightly. "Sometimes systems need disruption to evolve. The old equilibrium was based on fear and calculated self-interest. Perhaps a new one can emerge based on something better." "Your people remain an enigma to most of the galaxy," Ilara said. "They fear what they don't understand." "We know," Chen acknowledged. "Humanity has always inspired both fear and fascination. But we're ready to be more visible now, to take a more active role." "Because of us?" Ilara asked. "Because we sent that desperate message." Chen looked out over the city, where human and Talion worked side by side to rebuild what had been destroyed. "Partly," she admitted, "but also because your message confirmed what we had observed, that this galaxy needs change. That too many species suffer when power operates without principle." She turned to face the Talion leader directly. "Prime Minister, Humanity spent its first decades in space watching from the shadows, trying to understand the rules before we committed ourselves. What we saw troubled us. Powerful species prospering while vulnerable ones suffered, treaties honored only when convenient, principles abandoned at the first sign of risk. And now? Ilara asked. Now we've decided it's time to change the rules, Chen said simply. Not through conquest or domination, but by example. By showing that there is strength in standing for something beyond self-interest. As the sun set over Talia Prime, casting long shadows across the healing landscape, Ilara understood that she was witnessing not just the rebirth of her world, but perhaps a turning point for the galaxy itself. The desperate call that had seemed so futile had reached ears none had truly understood. Humanity had answered, and in that answer lay the possibility of a different future, one where strength served compassion, where power protected principle, and where no civilization would face extinction alone in the dark. The rules had indeed changed. And perhaps, Ilara thought as she watched human and Talian children playing together in a newly established park, they had changed for the better. In the star-filled sky above, the first joint Talian-human defense fleet began its patrol, not as conquerors or enforcers, but as guardians of something fragile and precious. The promise that in this vast, indifferent cosmos, none who called for help would face the darkness alone. Not while humanity had the power to answer.